Hi everyone, welcome to Fablehaven Monday. My name is Haley and I'm here with you from the Gale Library in Newton. I hope you guys are enjoying this July 4th weekend and you're staying warm or cool if it's hot, because I'm pre-recording this, so I'm not sure what the weather's doing, but I am thinking it's going to be a really nice weekend. So we are on chapter 10 of 19, and if you guys remember, chapter 9 was called Hugo, and Seth met this huge kind of mud-made robot, and he was having fun giving him instructions to do cartwheels, and they were in preparation for the Midsummer Eve, which is the evening where they have to be all locked up in their room tight because all of the animals and creatures of Fablehaven basically go crazy. So we are in chapter 10, and it is called Midsummer Eve. I haven't read it yet, so I've been excited about it, pretty much excited as Seth has been, I think. So I will just give you a quick recap of the end of chapter 9. "Did you see that?" Seth cried. "He's better than a water balloon launcher." "Regular catapult," Dale muttered. "Very impressive," Lena agreed dryly. "Forgive me if I have to put a few of our pumpkins to more practical use. You boys come and help cut the rest of our harvest so we can get them loaded." "Can't Hugo do a few more tricks?" Seth begged. "He knows cartwheels." "There will be time for nonsense later," Lena assured him. "We need to finish our preparations for this evening." So if you remember, he had Hugo grab a pumpkin and throw it as far as he could into the woods, and he wanted to have more fun messing around and playing with Hugo. All right, chapter 10 of Brandon Mull's Fablehaven is called Midsummer Eve. Grandpa prodded the logs in the fireplace with a poker. A shower of sparks swirled up the chimney as one log split open, revealing an interior of glowing embers. Dale poured himself a cup of steaming coffee, adding 3 spoonfuls of sugar. Lena peered out of the window through the blinds. "The sun will reach the horizon in moments," she announced. Kendra sat beside Seth on the sofa, watching Grandpa stoke the fire. The preparations were all in place. The entrances to the house were crowded with jack-o'-lanterns. Lena had been right. Dale had carved more than 200 of them. Not quite 30 fairies had reported for duty. Many fewer than Grandpa had expected, even given the recent strained relations. 8 of the fairy lanterns were placed on the roof outside of the attic, 4 at each window. Glow sticks illuminated most of the pumpkins, 2 in each. Grandpa Sorensen apparently ordered them in bulk. Sorry. "Will it start right when the sun goes down?" Seth asked. "Things won't really get going until twilight fades," Grandpa said, setting the poker beside the other fire irons. "But the last hour has come for you children to retire to your room." "I want to stay up with you," Seth said. "The attic bedroom is the safest place in the house," Grandpa said. "Why don't we all stay in the attic?" Kendra asked. Grandpa shook his head. The spell that makes the attic impenetrable function only if it's occupied by children. Without children or adults in the room, the barriers become effectual. "Isn't the whole place supposed to be safe?" Kendra asked. "I believe so, but on an enchanted preserve, nothing is ever certain. I am concerned by the scant number of fairies who reported this afternoon. I worry this could be a particular uproarious Midsummer Eve, perhaps the worst since I've lived here." A long, mournful howl underscored this statement. The disturbing call was answered by a stranger howl, closer, that ended with a cackle. Chills tingled behind Kendra's shoulders. "The sun is gone," Lena reported from the window. She squinted, then put a hand to her mouth. Closing the slat, she stepped away from the blinds. "They're already entering the yard." Kendra leaned forward. Lena looked really upset. She had paled visibly. I don't know what's going on with me today. I can't get my words out. She had paled visibly. Her dark eyes were unsettled. Grandpa scowled. "Real trouble?" She nodded. Grandpa clapped his hands together. "Up to the attic." The tension in the room prevented Kendra from uttering any protest. Apparently Seth sensed the same urgency. Grandpa Sorensen followed them up the stairs, down the hall, and up into the attic. "Get under the covers," Grandpa said. "What's around the beds?" Seth asked, examining the floor. "Circles of special salt," Grandpa said. "An extra protection." Kendra stepped carefully over the salt, pulled back the covers, and climbed into bed. The sheets felt cool. Grandpa handed her a pair of small, spongy cylinders. Earplugs, he said, passing a pair to Seth as well. I suggest you wear them. They should help mute the tumult so you can sleep. Just cram them in our ears, Seth said, eyeing one suspiciously. That's the idea, Grandpa said. An eruption of high-pitched laughter blared from the yards. Kendra and Seth exchanged concerned glances. Grandpa took a seat at the edge of Kendra's bed. I need for you kids to be as brave as possible and responsible for me tonight, he said. They nodded silently. You should know, he went on. I didn't let you come here merely out of a favor to your parents. Your grandmother and I are getting on in years. The day will come when somebody else will be needed to care for the preserve. We need to find heirs. Dale is a good man, but he has no interest in running things here. You kids have impressed me so far. You are bright, adventurous, and courageous. There are some unpleasant aspects living here. Festival nights are a good example. Perhaps you wonder why we don't just go spend the night in a hotel. If we did, we would return to find the house in ruins. Our presence is essential to the magic that protects these walls. If you are ever going to be involved with the work on this preserve, you will need to learn to cope with certain unpleasant realities. Look at tonight as a test. If the chaotic glamour outside is too much for you, then you do not belong here. There is no shame in this. People who belong here are rare. We'll be fine, said Seth. I believe you will. Listen carefully to my final instructions. Once I leave the room, no matter what you hear, no matter what happens, do not leave your beds. We will not come back to check on you until morning. You may think that you hear me, Dale, or Lena asking to come in. Be forewarned, it will not be us. The room is invulnerable unless you open a window or a door. Remain in your beds and that will not happen. With the fairy lanterns at your window, odds are that nothing will come near this part of the house. Try to ignore the tumult tonight, and we'll all share a special breakfast in the morning. Any questions? I'm scared, Kendra said. Don't go. You'll be safer without me. We'll keep watching downstairs all night. Everything will be fine. Just try and go to sleep. It's okay, Grandpa, said Seth. I'll keep an eye on her. Keep the other on yourself, Grandpa said sternly. You mind me tonight. This is no game. I will. Outside, the wind began to whistle through the trees. The day had been calm, but now a groaning gust shook the house. Overhead, the shingles rattled and timbers creaked. Grandpa crossed to the door. Strange winds are blowing. I better get downstairs. Good night. Sleep tight. I'll greet you at sunrise. He closed the door. The wind subsided. Goldilocks chuckled softly. You've got to be kidding, Kendra said. I know, Seth said. I'm practically wet in the bed. I don't think I'll sleep all night. I know I won't. We better try, said Kendra. Okay. Kendra inserted the earplugs. Closing her eyes, she curled up and snuggled into the covers. All she had to do was fall asleep, and she could escape the frightening sounds of the night. She forced herself to relax, letting her body go limp, and she tried to calm her mind. It was hard not to fantasize about inheriting the estate. No way would they give it to Seth. He would blow the whole place up in 5 minutes. What would it be like to know all of the mysterious secrets of Fablehaven? It might be scary if she were alone. She would have to share the secret with her parents so that they could live with her. After a couple of minutes, she rolled over to face the other direction. She had always had a tough time falling asleep when she were too deliberate about it. She tried to think of nothing, tried to focus on calm, regular breathing. Seth was saying something, but the earplugs muffled it. She pulled them out. What? I said, the suspense is killing me. Are you actually using the earplugs? Of course. You're not. I don't want to miss anything. Are you crazy? I'm not tired at all, he said. Are you? Not much. Dare me to look out the window. Don't be stupid. It's barely sunset. What better time to look? How about never? You're being a bigger chicken than Goldilocks. You've got less brains than Hugo. The wind rose again, steadily gaining force. Warbling moans echoed on the breeze, groaning in different pitches, forming eerie, discordant harmonies. A long bird-like scream overpowered the ghostly chorus of the moans, starting at one side of the house, passing overhead, and finally fading. In the distance, a bell began to toll. Seth no longer looked quite so brave. Maybe we should try and get some sleep, he said, putting in the earplugs. Kendra did likewise. The sounds were muffled, but they continued. The haunted wind laminating, the house shuddering, the increased assortment of shrieks, screams, howls, and wild bursts of gibbering laughter. The pillow grew warm, so Kendra flipped it over to the cold side. The only light in the room had been filtered through the curtains. As twilight dimmed, the room darkened. Kendra pressed her hands over her ears, trying to augment the dampening power of the earplugs. She told herself the sounds were just the storm. A deep throbbing beat joined the cacophony, keeping a steady rhythm. As the pulsing percussion increased in volume and tempo, it accompanied by chanting in a wailing language. Kendra resisted otherworldly images of vicious demons on the hunt. A pair of hands closed around her throat. She jumped and flailed, smacking Seth across the cheek with the back of her hand. "Geez," Seth complained, stumbling away. "You asked for it. What's the matter with you?" "You should have seen your face," he laughed, recovering from the slap. "Get back in bed." He sat on the side of her bed. "You should take out your earplugs. The noise isn't so bad after a while. It reminds me of that CD that Dad plays on Halloween." She removed them, except it's shaking the house, and it isn't make-believe. "Don't you want to look out of the window?" "No! Stop talking about it." Seth leaned over and turned on the nightlight, a glowing statue of Snoopy. "I don't see the big deal. I mean, there are all sorts of cool things out there right now. What's wrong with just taking a little peek?" "Grandpa said not to get out of your bed." "Grandpa lets people look when they get older," Seth said. "Dale told me, so it can't be that dangerous. Grandpa just thinks I'm an idiot." "Yeah, and he's right. Think about it. You wouldn't want to run across a tiger out there in the wilderness. You'd be scared to death. But at a zoo, who cares? It can't get you. The room is safe. Peeking out of the window will be like looking at a zoo full of monsters. More like looking out of a shark cage." A sudden staccato flurry of pounding shook the roof, as if a team of horses were galloping across the shingles. Seth flinched, raising his arms protectively. Kendra heard the creak and rattle of wagon wheels. "Don't you want to see what that was?" Seth asked. "Are you just trying to tell me that didn't scare you?" "I expect to be scared. That's the whole point." "If you don't get back into bed," Kendra warned, "I'm telling Grandpa in the morning." "Don't you want to see who's playing the drums?" "Seth, I'm not kidding. You probably won't even be able to see anything. We have a telescope." Something outside roared, a thunderous bellow of ferocity. It was enough to silence the conversation. The night continued to rage. The roar came again, if anything, with greater intensity, momentarily drowning out all the other commotion. Kendra and Seth eyed one another. "I bet it's a dragon," he said breathlessly, running over to the window. "Seth, no!" Seth pulled aside the curtain. The 4 jack-o'-lanterns shed a mellow illumination across a portion of the roof directly beyond the window. For a moment, Seth thought he saw something whirling in the darkness at the edge of the light, a whirling mass of silky black fabric. Then he saw only blackness. "No stars," he reported. "Seth, get away from there!" Kendra had her sheets pulled up to her eyes. He squinted through the window a moment longer. "Too dark. I can't see anything." A glimmering fairy floated up from one of the jack-o'-lanterns, peering at Seth through the silently wrapped window pane. "Hey, a fairy came out!" The tiny fairy waved an arm and was joined by 3 others. One made a face at Seth, and then all 4 streaked away into the night. Now he could see nothing. Seth closed the curtain and backed away from the window. "You had to look," Kendra said. "Are you satisfied?" "The fairies in the jack-o'-lantern flew away," he said. "Nice work. They probably saw who they were guarding." "Actually, I think you're right. One made a face at me." "Get back in bed," Kendra ordered. The drumming ceased, along with the chanting. The ghostly wind grew quiet. The howls and screams and laughter diminished in a volume and frequency. Something pattered across the roof. Then, silence. "Something's wrong," whispered Seth. "They probably saw you. Get back in bed." "I have a flashlight in my emergency kit." He went to the nightstand by his bed and withdrew a small flashlight from the cereal box. Kendra kicked off her sheets and lunged at Seth, tackling him to his bed. She wrenched the flashlight from his grasp and pushed him to regain her feet. He charged her, twisting. She used this momentum to shove him onto his bed. "Quit it, Seth, or I'll go and get Grandpa right now." "I'm not the one starting a fight." His expression was a portrait of wounded resentment. She hated when he tried to act like the victim after initiating trouble. "Neither am I. You hit me first. Then you jumped on me. You stop breaking the rules or I'm going straight downstairs. You're worse than the witch. Grandpa should build you a shack. Get in your bed. Give me the light. I bought it with my own money." They were interrupted by the sound of a baby crying. There was nothing desperate about it, just the bawling of an upset infant. The crying seemed to emanate from outside the dark window. "A little baby," Seth said. "No, it's some trick." "Mama, Mama," the baby whined. "Sounds pretty real," said Seth. "Let me take a look. It's going to be a skeleton or something." Seth grabbed the flashlight from Kendra. She neither gave it to him nor prevented him from taking it. He jogged over to the window, holding the front of the flashlight against the window pane and cupping a hand around it to minimize reflection. He switched it on. "Oh my gosh," he said. "It's a real baby." "Anything else?" "Just a crying baby." The crying stopped. "Now he's looking at me." Kendra could no longer resist. She went and stood behind Seth. There on the roof, just beyond the window, stood a tear-streaked toddler who looked barely old enough to stand. The baby wore cloth diapers and nothing else. He had wispy blonde curls and a little round tummy with an outy belly button. Eyes brimming with tears, the child held onto its pudgy arms towards the window. "It has to be a trick," Kendra said. "An illusion." Spotlighted by the flashlight, the toddler took a step towards the window and fell to all fours. He pouted on the verge of crying again. Standing up, the baby tried another wobbly step. Goosebumps stood out on his chest and his arms. "He looks real," said Seth. "What if he's real? Why would a baby be on the roof?" The baby toddled to the window, pressing a chubby palm against the glass. Something glinted in the light behind him. Seth shifted the beam to a pair of green-eyed wolves approaching stealthily from the edge of the roof. The animals paused as the light fell on them. Both looked mangy and lean. Mangy and lean. One of the wolves bared sharp teeth foaming from his frothing mouth. The other was missing an eye. "They're using him as bait," Seth yelled. The baby looked back at the wolves and then turned toward Seth and Kendra, bawling with a renewed vigor, fresh tears streaming, tiny hands slapping the window panes. The wolves charged. The toddler wailed. In her cage, Goldilocks clucked wildly. Seth threw open the window. "No!" Kendra shouted, although she reflectively wanted to do the same thing. The instant the window flew open, wind gushed into the room as if air itself had been waiting to pounce. The baby dove into the room, transforming grotesquely as it landed on the floor in a deft somersault. The child was replaced by a leering goblin with yellow slits for eyes, a puckered nose, and a face like a dried cantaloupe. Bold and scabrous on the top, the head was fringed by long web-like hair. The sinuous arms were gangly, the hands long and leathery, tipped by hooked claws. Ribs, collarbones, and pelvis jutted hideously. Spidery networks of veins bulged against maroon flesh. With supernatural haste, the wolves also sailed through the window before Seth could move to close it. Kendra shoved past Seth and jerked the window shut in time to impede the entrance of coldly beautiful women, swathed in writhing black garments. The apparition's dark hair undulated like vapor in the breeze. Her pallid face was slightly translucent. Gazing into those empty, searing eyes froze Kendra where she stood. Babbling whispers filled her mind. Her mouth felt dry. She could not swallow. Seth yanked the curtains shut, tugged Kendra toward the bed. Whatever trance had momentarily organized her dissolve. Disorientated, she ran alongside Seth to the bed, sensing something in pursuit. When they leaped onto the mattress, a brilliant light flared behind them, accompanied by a crisp sutter like firecrackers. Kendra twisted to get a look. The maroon goblin stood near the bed, holding its bony shoulder. The scowling creature stood about, as tall as Dale. Hesitantly, it reached a knobbly hand towards her, and another bright flash sent it searing away. The circle of salt! At first, she had not grasped why Seth was dragging her to the bed. At least one of them was thinking. Glancing down, Kendra saw the 2-inch dune of salt surrounding the bed indeed marked the line that the goblin could not cross. A 12-foot centipede with 3 sets of wings and 3 pairs of taloned feet corkscrewed around the room in a complex aerial display. A brutish monster, with a pronounced underbite and plates down its spine, hurled the wardrobe across the room. The wolves had shed their disguises as well. The maroon goblin cavorted around the room in a feral tantrum, tearing down bookshelves, upsetting toy chests, and snapping the horn of the rocking horse. It picked up Goldilocks' cage and flung it against the wall. The slender bars crumpled and the door sprang open. The terrified chicken took an ungainly flight in a golden flurry of feathers. Goldilocks was coming towards the bed. The winged centipede struck as it at the flustered hen, but missed. The maroon demon made an acrobatic leap and caught the chicken by both legs. Goldilocks clucked and squirmed in mortal panic. Seth jumped off the bed. Crouching, he scooped up 2 handfuls from the circle of salt and charged at the wiry goblin. Now holding the chicken in one hand, the sneering goblin rushed to meet him. An instant before the outstretched hand of the demon reached him, Seth flung a handful of salt. Releasing Goldilocks, the demon reeled back, scorched by the blinding blaze. The chicken made straight for the bed, and Seth tossed his other handful of salt in a wide arc to cover their retreat, scolding the flying centipede in the process. The bulky creature with the underbite tried to beat Seth to the bed, arriving too late and receiving a violent shock as it collided with the invisible salt barrier. Back on the bed, Seth clung to Goldilocks, arm quivering convulsively. There's a picture here, look. It looks terrifying. The maroon demon growled. His face and chest were charred from the salt. Tendrils of smoke curled up from the burns. Turning, the demon pulled a book from the shelf and tore it in half. The door flew open, and Dale leveled a shotgun at the monster with the underbite. "You kids stay put, no matter what," he called. All 3 monsters converged in the doorway. Dale retreated down the stairs, gun silent. The winged centipede spiraled out of the door above the other scrambling creatures. They heard a blast from the shotgun down the hall. "Shut the door and stay put," Dale hollered. Kendra ran and slammed the door, then sprinted back to her bed. Seth held Goldilocks, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whimpered. "It'll be okay." From downstairs came repeated gunshots, growls, roars, shrieks, glass shattering, wood splintering. Outside, the cacophonious uproar resumed louder than ever. Pagan drums, earthly choirs, tribal chanting, wailing lamentations, guttural snarls, unnatural howls, and piercing screams united in relentless disharmony. Kendra, Seth, and Goldilocks sat on the bed, awaiting dawn. Kendra had to constantly fight images of the woman with the black swirling garments. She could not get the apparition out of her mind. When she had looked into those soulless eyes, even though the lady was outside, Kendra had felt certain there would be no escape. Late in the night, the furor finally began to relent, replaced by more unnerving sounds. Babies began to cry beyond the window again, calling for Mama. When that failed to elicit a response, the voices of young children pleaded for help. "Kendra, please hurry, they're coming! Seth, open up, help us! Seth, don't leave us out here!" After the cries went ignored for a while, snarls and screams would stimulate the demise of the young supplicants. Then a new batch of solicitors began begging for admittance. Perhaps most disconcerting was when Grandpa was inviting them down to breakfast. "We made it, kids. The sun is rising. Come on. Lena cooked hot cakes." "How do we know you're our Grandpa?" Kendra asked, more than a little suspicious. "'Cause I love you. Hurry, the food's getting cold." "I don't think the sun is up yet," Seth replied. "It's just a little cloudy this morning." "Go away," Kendra said. "Just let me in. I want to kiss you good morning." "Our Grandpa never kisses us, you sicko," yelled Seth. "Get out of our house." The exchange was followed by a vicious banging on the door for a solid 5 minutes. The hinges shook, but the door held. The night wore on. Kendra leaned against the headboard as Seth dozed at her side. Despite the noise, her eyelids began to feel heavy. Suddenly, she jerked awake. Grey light was seeping through the curtains. Goldilocks wandered the floor, packing at kernels from her spilled bucket feed. When the curtains were masking unmistakable sunlight, Kendra nudged Seth. He looked around, blinking, then crept to the window, peeked out. "The sun is officially up," he announced. "We made it." "I'm scared to go downstairs," Kendra whispered. "Everybody's fine," Seth said nonchalantly. "Then why haven't they come to get us?" Seth had no response. Kendra had gone easy on him during the night. The consequences for opening the window were brutal enough without placing blame and starting arguments, and Seth had really acted remorsefully. He was now reverting to his idiot self. Kendra glared at him. "You realize you might have killed them all?" His face fell, and he turned away, shoulders shaking with sobs. He buried his face in his hands. "They're probably fine," he squealed. "Dale had a gun and everything. They know how to handle themselves." Kendra felt bad, seeing that Seth clearly was worried too. She went and tried to give him a hug. He shoved her away. Leave me alone. Seth, whatever happened isn't your fault. Of course it's my fault. His nose was getting congested. I mean, they tricked us. I sort of wanted to open the window too when I saw the wolves charging. You know, it was in case it wasn't fake. I knew it might be a trick, he sobbed. But that baby looked so real, and I thought they might have kidnapped him to use him as bait. I thought that I could save him. You were trying to do the right thing. She attempted to hug him once more, but he pushed her away again. Don't, he snapped. I didn't mean to blame you, Kendra said. You were acting like you didn't even care. Of course I care. You don't think I'm terrified to go down there and find out what I did? You didn't do it. They tricked you. I would have opened the window if you hadn't. If I would have stayed in bed, none of this would have happened, Seth lamented. Maybe they're fine. Right, and they let a monster come into the house and up the door pretended to be Grandpa. Maybe they had to hide down in the basement or something. Seth was no longer crying. He picked up a doll and used her dress to wipe his nose. I hope so. Just in case something bad did happen, you can't blame yourself. All you did was open a window. If those monsters did something bad, it's their fault. Partly. Grandpa and Lena and Dale all know the things that live here are risky. I'm sure they're fine, but if they aren't, you mustn't blame yourself. Whatever. I'm serious. I like it better when you're funny. You know what I liked, Kendra said? What? When you saved Goldilocks. He laughed, snorting a little through his stuffy nose. Did you see how badly the salt burned that guy? He retrieved the doll and wiped his nose again on the dress. It was really brave. I'm just glad it worked. It was quick thinking. Seth glanced at the door and then back at Kendra. We should probably go and check out the damage. If you say so. Aww. I'm dying to read the next chapter. That was the end. And I want to see if Grandpa's okay. And Lena and Dave. Dale, so I'm going to read that straight away. Wasn't that spooky? That was a freaky chapter, and I just knew Seth would not be able to contain himself. He is a monkey, that one. Okay, so chapter 11, we will be back with chapter 11 called Aftermath, in which I hope, I'm just trying to take a peek at the pages to try and see if Grandpa's okay. I hope everyone's okay, and we will be back next Monday with chapter 11, Aftermath of Brandon Mull's Fablehaven. Meantime, enjoy the rest of your week. I don't know what's going on with my words today. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I will see you next Monday. Take care, you guys. Bye.